Hey guys, so I just want to make this video for hunters in the new Helm's Deep expansion to get a feel for what I trait and what I do to maximize DPS. So I'm here in Snowboard. This is kind of where I do my testing, both on the 85 dummy and the 75 dummy. So as you can see, my last parse up here in the corner. Recently I just got the uh, induction bow damage set, which gave me an extra 10%, as you can see right there. So I was curious to see what the new damage would be. Initially I parsed about 4.1 to 4.5, and that depended a lot on how many Heartseeker procs I got. And I'm gonna go into kind of my build in a second here, but for a minute parse, anything over 4k DPS seems about standard for most classes. And then I think my personal opinion is if you're going over 4.5k DPS right now over a minute, you're doing fairly well on most classes, especially for the RK and Hunter. Obviously, it's kind of hard to DPS parse on a dummy with classes like the Warden and Berg a little bit because it bleeds. I try and use my Hunter bleeds effectively, so that way I'm rotating them in after the dummy resets to maximize the full bleed potential. So just going a little bit into the parse here. Let's bring this out. Oops, wrong one. I can't. There we go. Alright, so clearly pen shot is still one of the best attacks. You can see I got a lot of Heartseeker damage going there. Just standard stuff that I use in my rotation. But I'm going to go into the trait line first because that's a little bit newer. So this is how I trait. I'm currently traded Redline. I think it's easily the most you can. The damage is much greater than in Blue Line right now, mainly because the fleetness reduction set does not currently work. I hope they fix that to make Redline viable. So this is how I trait for just general stuff. As you can see, I go pretty much full Redline. Things like we'll start from top to bottom. I still like Heartseeker, and the reason why is I have the tier 2 Erebor set, which although obviously I'm losing a bit of agility and stats because the new 95 stuff has better gear or better stats, the 2 and 4 set bonus really make the difference. The 2 set bonus, the Burn Hot damage, when I use Burn Hot, gives me an additional 25% bow critical multiplier, which is huge. That's by far worth it, even without this next proc. And then obviously every focus bow attack has a chance to reset the cooldown of Heartseeker, and therefore making it instacast. So hopefully, let's see if I can get that to proc. So basically it's any focus attack. Generally it procs for me with pen shot right there. As you can see, I have buff bars kind of enabled. This is my setup here. That swift bow proc, as you just saw, I can use swift bow instacast, and there's my Heartseeker proc. So that pops up, and I know I can just press R, and it instacast Heartseeker right there for 11k damage or whatever that was. So that's really nice. Heartseeker is awesome. Not only does it hit really hard, it also has a very nice bleed right now, and then also that incoming healing modifier, and then if the target CC'd, it does an additional extra damage right there. So I love that skill, and I think having that 4 set bonus gives me a little bit extra DPS having that. Otherwise, Heartseeker is virtually useless because of the long induction time. It's 2.5 seconds. That's just too long to use in a normal rotation. So going back to the trait trees, I really like pen shot. It's a great skill. I put all rank that up to 5. You're definitely going to want this one. The more times you can crit, the better off you are, especially with this one that it allows you to have the, this is almost a must-have in any hunter line. The focus regeneration on crit, that's huge. As you can see for the last parse, I had 60% crits on that dummy, which means that I got a lot of focus back. Let's see, I like press onward now. It's not great like this, but I have a swap sword, so I just quickly swap to that, and then it gives me a 30-second cooldown because I have the swap, the minus 90-second duration, so I can use that. The induction is much shorter, and then I just swap back using. I have it all key mapped. I'm not macroing in any of that, but it even switching back still gives you that 30-second duration. So it's a great power source, great morale source. All in all, it's a great thing for only putting 1 point in. You can increase it by putting points into here, but I decided not to, and then just go onward. This is a great one to put in, and this is the Quickshot, what I was showing you earlier, where Quickshot has a 20% chance to make the Swift Bow instacast, basically. So while you're spamming it, and first time, look at, I got the proc. So if I do Swift Bow right there, it's no induction, just straight up insta-cast. You still keep the buff for whatever reason, but I guess that's kind of nice because if you use Swift Bow and then you get the proc, it loops around because the buff lasts for 10 seconds and the cooldown for Swift Bow is 10 seconds, so it just works out perfectly. What else is there? Let's see. Going onward, this one's a great one to have as well. The Quickshot Bow Inductions. So it's just a stacking up to 3. Every time you use Quickshot, you get a tiered fast draw. As you can see, for tier 3, it's up to 30%. Now, since the duration is every 6 seconds, you're going to be wanting to use Quickshot basically every 6 seconds. Otherwise, it tiers down, or completely, I believe. Let's see, it's tier 3 right now, and then it just completely goes away. So you're going to want to be doing Quickshot a lot now, especially because you can get that Swift Bow proc, and that's just huge. So that's a good one to have as well. Going down, strength stance damage. I've been toying with the fact, and the whole buff stance duration is kind of, I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet. I had the stance duration buff set bonus, so I was able to have that. But basically what happens, if you don't know, every time you switch stances you get a 10-second buff, or 15 depending on if you have that set bonus. And for the strength stance, it's really nice. It's 2k crit, which bumps me up basically to cap, which is awesome. But the problem is, although it works perfectly if you just kind of do it out of combat, once you start doing an induction, so let's say I'll do Heartseeker right now, I can't switch. As you can see, it didn't switch to strength stance right away. Now it switched after I had already done the attack, so it kind of ruins your rotation a bit trying to switch. You can kind of do it in between if you really want to. I tried macroing it a little bit. It's just I haven't gotten it to where I want it yet, but it's nice to have at least the crit buff. The finesse one isn't great, and then the endurance buff is pretty decent, but not something if you want to really maximize DPS. I love Rain of Arrows. Right now it's currently bugged. Rain of Arrows will not always, even if you have this maxed out, it won't always reset. So that's really nerfing the Hunter's AoE DPS right now. This one's a great one to have for obvious reasons, induction bow damage. I'm not a huge fan of Merciful Shot, especially on dummies because you can't use it. So for parsing, that's kind of useless. So I actually use this setup for single target parsing. Obviously, if I wanted to get the max, probably I would get rid of, these AoE traits. But this is just my general parse. So I like parsing in real situation as best as possible to kind of mimic what I would do in an actual raid environment. obviously I would have more cappy buffs and stuff like that, but um, not fully re-geared just for the sake of parsing. That's another one good to have. And then I'm not sure if I really love Upshot. It's kind of like EC now. It hits kind of hard. As you can see right there, that was like a 12k. But if you don't have much focus, it doesn't do too much, and obviously it consumes all 9. So it's kind of I'm not a huge fan. I'd rather use Heartseeker. Um, but I suppose if you don't have the Heartseeker proc set, maybe you want to use the Upshot a little bit more for some zing in your DPS line. And then obviously this one is fantastic if you have Heartseeker. And then I put a couple in the blue just to get more range damage and induction. And then I put 1 point in here just to get split shot. It's a good one to have for AoE if you're run out of focus spamming rain of arrows. So it's just a utility, and that's pretty much it for Redline. And let's see here. So I'll go into virtues. This is just raise traits, pretty standard stuff. One thing to know now is that the elf bow damage is 5%. That's huge. Before it was 2%, and then this one is now 5% as well. Elder's Grace is nice, but I hardly use it. And blah blah blah. The rest is self-explanatory. Alright, so virtues, I go for three things here. 1 is morale, 2 is tac mit because the hunter lacks tactical mitigation, and 3 is agility. So those are the 3 things I try and balance. Zeal and Valor are fantastic. With those 2, you'll have basically 1,000 morale increase just by having those 2 at, rank 18. Then I go for Tolerance, which is awesome for hunters, gives you that agility with that tac mit buff, and then obviously Fidelity with some more Vit and tac mit, and then I love Determination for that extra 54 agility, gives you an extra 500 mastery basically and some extra morale. So those are my virtue setups. You could probably get away with, I don't know, there's some other ones that are decent, but I wouldn't really get resistance as a hunter. So something like Honor, it's decent. It's got that tac mit, it's got that vitality. So if you're in the moors, I could see why maybe you want that extra resistance buff. But for what I'm doing, I'm assuming that the tank has aggro, and therefore I'm not necessarily tanking stuff, so I don't really need that extra resistance anyway. And I'd rather have something like an extra 500 morale from Valor. So going into my gear and my stats, so I have agility food on here. It's not the best agility food, but I have about 3,800 base agility. Obviously things like I'm still using this, so that will give me an extra 122 agility. So I get about 4k agility once I get up to that level. Gear wise, I'm still using the 85 earring. That gives me the proc for the crit chance. So all in all, that earring basically gives me an extra 2k crit. Let's see if I can get it to proc real quick here. And then obviously I'm using some of the big battle stuff, which, as you can see here, that's the crit rating buff, and that tiers up to 1,500. Let's see. So I'm using big battle jewelry. I like this hunter bubble proc set. It's kind of defensive. Main stat vitality, second stat agility, but the proc is really, really nice. As you can see, that's 1,500 crit. But here's that hunter bubble. Just 10% on chance hit. Gives you an extra 15% run speed, so it'd be great in the moors, things like that. And gives you that extra bubble. And then I'm using that ring proc, like I said. Cape, I'm using this cloak. I'm using 2 95 pieces and then 4 of the Erebor set.
William joined your channel.
My bow is this is my bow. and this is my LI. So for my bow, these are the legacies I went with. At 75, or at 85, sorry, I went with something like that setup. As you can see, I basically dropped the power cost. Let's move these over. I dropped the power cost legacies in favor of some more offensive legacies. Obviously, you really want to have the bow critical multipliers, both focus and induction. Those are huge. And then, so that basically stayed the same. This hunter damage over time was originally just barbed arrow, but now it's just hunter damage. So it also applies to the Heartseeker dot. So that's why I'm using that. That's a great legacy to have. Obviously, the stat legacy is much larger than it was at 85. And then this is another good legacy that they just came out with, the induction bow damage. And then I also went with Quickshot crit chance. As you can see, if you're in precision, if you crit, you'll get an extra focus back. So that is huge and really important in the hunter's rotation now. Now that they've changed a lot of, basically made blue line the new, or red line the new blue line, or the old blue line. As you can see, the only difference is I went back to the agility crit gem because I was having trouble getting up to the crit cap. So I can get basically the crit cap now, especially if I stance swap. But pretty much with that crit proc on this earring, I'm pretty much at cap. These are the relics I like to use. Pretty standard max DPS hunter stuffs. And then for the offhand, experiment a little. You can get another 10% for strength stance. So strength stance is up to 30% range damage. I still like precision better, even though it only gives one focus every 5 seconds instead of 2 because we lost fleetness. But it still gives that 13% bow critical multiplier. I just feel like I get a little bit extra DPS using precision still. So that's why I went with that. Obviously you need that legacy. I love having this max target legacy. That makes my rain of arrows 10 targets, as well as my split shot 7. So that's huge. So it's, even though it's not, you don't really, I mean, if you wanted just a single target DPS setup, that's kind of a waste because you don't need it for a single target. But it's nice to have that on there and not have multiple LIs. And you don't really lose much single target DPS by just having that on there. And then obviously those 3 stat legacies are the ones you want to have as a hunter. Will and might aren't useful at all. So then other than that, base stats, I have about 51k mastery when fully buffed, over 10k finesse. My evade's pretty high, basically capped evade. 16% parry. My Physment attackment went up a lot. I used to have about 20% attackment at 85, but because of all this new vitality, I used to have like 600 vitality, and now I have 2500, so that's huge. And my agility only went up about 800, but then again, I'm using some of these defensive bracelets for that bubble, so I could get a little bit more agility and less vitality. But yeah, I'm sitting over 40% attackment, and Physment, so that's really, really good. And then lastly, just hunter rotation. Obviously, some of the key things is focus management. So they also added for Redline a 50% range crit chance from stealth, and then you can also use improved focus on expiration, gives you an additional 25% chance. And so therefore I have a 102 point, well, for that first hit, basically a 102.9% crit chance, which basically means insta crit. So that's great to use at the start of a pull for first attack. So generally what I like to do is, for starting out for parsing, is do that. Then start off your burn hot, which will give you the obviously the extra range damage. I haven't made a swap bow for it yet, but that I could get an extra 10% damage using that, and then the bow critical multiplier. And then I like starting off with barbed arrow right now, or burning arrow, because I have oil on. That just gets the bleed going, and then I like to basically spam pen shots until I get low. And you can either use a focus pot at that point or use intent concentration. Generally like using focus pots because obviously then you get the 35% magnitude. And then from there you want to basically try and get your quick shots going to get that haste buff. And then hopefully you'll get the swift bow proc pretty quickly, and you'll be able to use swift bow. And then, you know, basically every time you want to keep your bleed up going here. And then I also watch out for my Heart Seeker proc. Other than that, I have a couple other skills mapped to my mouse, but I don't really use these too much. Obviously in a long fight after a bunch of swift bows, this merciful shot's going to cost like no focus, so then it's worth using, but in the beginning it's not. You can't use it on dummies anyway. This skill is kind of meh. I don't love it. It doesn't do that much damage. It costs the same focus as a pen shot. It's not great for parsing. It's okay for CC abilities. And then upshot, it just uses all your focus, and then you're stuck kind of at the bottom. So it doesn't work out too well. So that's kind of my parsing rotation. Let's just give it a roll here. So you can do it either way, but and I didn't even do what I was saying, but but basically you want to try and keep that swift the fast draw buff up at once. I'll do another parse here just because I messed it up. I wasn't thinking. So you want to start in stealth. You want to do your improved focus first, then burn hot. So I would have done burn hot there, and then barbed arrow, spammed pen shots, then probably a focus pot or tent concentration. Then you can do more pen shot spams. Then my swift bow's off, so I do swift bow. Probably reapply a barbed arrow bleed at that point. Then do a bunch of quick shots to get my focus back up. Spam pen shots again. And that's pretty much it. Obviously my DPS isn't nearly where it should be because I didn't use burn hot this time, so that hurts it a little bit, but it's still upwards of 4K, and it's gonna go up once I actually do a right rotation. It's a little bit more, but the hunter's rotation right now, it really depends on how many Heart Seeker prots I get. And so therefore it's kind of luck. But that's pretty much it.